Welcome to All Hands on Deck, a team-based approach to accelerating learning. My name is Jenna Richard, and I am from the American Institutes for Research. In partnership with the Rhode Island Department of Education, through their State Systemic Improvement Plan, also known as the SIP, we developed the Rhode Island Intensive Math Intervention Project, which works with LEAs and schools across the state to improve math instruction and intervention. And with me are
Hello, I'm Melinda Griffin, and I'm a researcher here at American Institutes for Research.
And I am Emily Klein with the Rhode Island Department of Education.
Today, we will briefly describe acceleration as a methodology, how the Rhode Island Intensive Math Intervention Project, in collaboration with RIDE, created a professional learning plan, and the systemic approach we use to engage LEAs and schools across the state. Through the work on the Rhode Island Intensive Math Intervention Project, we had some LEAs and schools ask what were the best ways to support students as they begin to transition back to in-person learning. This is where we started exploring acceleration as a methodology to support the large number of students that could potentially be facing unfinished learning. So why focus on using acceleration? Research has shown that giving students simpler previous grade level material results in students falling further behind in their current grade level. This can result in a vicious cycle that ties down student learning year after year, leaving students demoralized and unengaged. On the other hand, providing supports at the moment they are needed in the classroom helps to make on-grade level content accessible to all of our students. Students are empowered with new skills and tools that they can use with the math they are learning now. When students immediately apply new skills, they are more likely to internalize them. With larger groups of students struggling to access the core and falling into the at-risk category of the MTSS framework, we need to be strategic about the supports we are providing, not just to some students, but to all. To ensure that we do not perpetuate the unfinished learning, we need to improve the efficiencies of the systems that we currently have in place. Providing the just-in-time acceleration supports in the core instruction is a great universal approach. As we often say, schools cannot intervene their way out of a core problem. Now is the time to provide support around what acceleration strategies are and how we can best support all learners in truly accessing the core instruction. You may be familiar with the term remediation, meaning teach again, when educators reteach content that students have not yet mastered before moving on to grade level content. As a result, significant time may be spent going back to previously learned content. This content is often presented in isolation and is not applied to what students are currently learning. Unfortunately, there is compelling evidence that giving students simpler previously grade level material results in students falling further behind in the content. On the other hand, acceleration strategies have been shown to help students catch up with learning. Acceleration focuses on teaching only what must be learned at the precise time it is needed, instead of reteaching everything that a student has not yet mastered. Teachers provide instruction on only the most important skills and knowledge for the specific unit that is being studied, focusing on what the student must minimally know to adequately access the content. Since students are exposed to grade level content, materials, and assignments, it is critical that teachers support students using differentiation techniques and appropriate scaffolds so that all students can access the content. We are not saying that remediation is not effective. Both remediation and acceleration are useful strategies to help students with gaps in their learning. We have gotten the questions a lot from Rhode Island educators that we're doing accelerated learning. Does that mean we don't provide intervention anymore? The answer is no. Acceleration strategies are not new ideas to special educators and leaders, but now is the time when we can come together as leaders to make it a priority for all. We do not need to search out new tools and processes to address the new challenges post the pandemic. We need to rely even more heavily on our interim assessment tools, MTSS-based decision-making frameworks, and implement them with an even higher degree of fidelity. When thinking about our MTSS framework and the varying levels of unfinished learning due to the pandemic, the percentage in each of those tiers probably have shifted dramatically. Tier 1 and Tier 2 could potentially be collapsing in. Things you might have done in your Tier 2 intervention might now need to be part of your core instructional practices if there are larger groups of students with similar needs. This is where acceleration comes in. When providing accelerated supports in the core, we want to be sure we are leveraging the strategies proven to be effective in targeted and intensive supports to ensure those students can access the core content and support the alignment and transfer of skills between intervention and core instruction.
So now let's talk about forming a professional learning plan to carry out acceleration. Accelerating learning is not a new idea, but now more than ever, it's affecting all of our learners. And we felt we needed to find a way to support educators and LEAs by giving them some planning tools and resources on how they might best take steps to identify student needs and accurately address those needs. This could mean providing just-in-time supports in the core classroom, or possibly providing some remediation supports outside the classroom, but leveraging the strategies in the core classroom through just-in-time supports. So how do we go about planning the work? In November 2020, the New Teacher Project, known as TNTP, put out a learning acceleration guide that gives, we got to go back one, Jim. There we go. That gives specific research-based guidance on doing acceleration. We also knew that our educators were stretched thin already, so we decided to create a series to support them that would specifically focus on math. And we purposefully made the modules asynchronous so that educators could access them at times convenient to their own lives. So based on TNTP's guide, there were 5 recommendations for accelerating student learning. To start, it's important to study the standards alongside year-long scopes and sequences to understand what will be covered when and how students will apply their knowledge, and then also how they also show their knowledge. It's important to identify the most critical prerequisite skills and knowledge that students will need in order to access on-grade level content. Multilingual learners and students with disabilities may need additional supports here. To plan your approach, educators will need to diagnose students' unfinished learning. While some pre-work was done in the first step of this, educators should be careful not to make assumptions about students' learning. Administering diagnostic assessments will provide the data needed to determine what content needs need to be prioritized for the students that you have in front of you. Once you have that data, you can begin to adjust your instructional materials and think about how to address students' unfinished learning. Remember, unlike remediation, these gaps should be addressed without an extended period of remedial content. Consider the pacing guidance and determine where to embed opportunities to address unfinished learning as it comes up in your scope and sequence. For administrators, teachers may need training to diagnose and provide acceleration support to students. So if so, make sure to plan your training content, identify who will facilitate the training, and who will carry out the training with teachers. Throughout the school year, educators will need to monitor whether students are mastering grade level content. And remember that adjustments may need to be made throughout the year based on your students' data. So based on these recommendations, we go to the next one, Jenna. We developed this asynchronous series of learning. We created learning modules that are coordinated to different school roles, such as the classroom teacher, administrators, and possibly interventionists who work with them. So let's take a look at the teacher modules we developed first. We decided to think about planning in terms of yearly planning, unit planning, and lesson planning. So for yearly planning, you would be determining the focus standards for the current grade level, considering how those standards from previous grades inform your current grade level, and working to create an overall plan for the entire academic year that uses acceleration to close those learning gaps. If we drop this down a little further, we come to unit planning. So this is actually starting to make a game plan to teach your grade level standards, determining where and when you're going to need to provide those acceleration supports, and planning your approach for diagnosing students' unfinished learning, making sure to focus on those prerequisite skills and knowledge areas that students need. Then we come down to what teachers do on a daily basis, the lesson planning. So this is where we learn how to incorporate acceleration strategies and scaffolds into daily lessons. We explored some just-in-time supports that teachers could use, helping teachers make that determination on whether they needed to just refresh a topic or actually reteach it, and what they might consider if they made the decision that they needed to remediate. Underlying these 3 teacher modules is an additional module called Assessing Learning Needs, because we don't want to just make assumptions about our students, we want to know where they actually need help. So this module focuses on diagnosing students' unfinished learning for those prerequisite skills and knowledge areas. Prerequisite is going to be the death of me in this presentation. Using multiple sources to guide decisions, and how to work as a team to plan that acceleration approach. In addition to the teacher modules, we have some modules that are specific for our administrators and for the interventionist. We did create an introduction module that could be used by anyone involved in providing acceleration supports. In this, we clarify the difference between remediation and acceleration. We talk about the characteristics of acceleration and review some of the recommendations for accelerating student learning. Specifically for administrators, we have a module called Making Acceleration a School-Wide Focus. In this, we review the recommendations for adopting acceleration practices school-wide. We discuss considerations and tips to keep in mind when implementing acceleration strategies. And we talk about creating an overall plan for implementing acceleration strategies throughout the school, so that it doesn't just become a one classroom here and a one classroom there type of approach, but it's systemic throughout. We also have a module on the role of the interventionist. And in this module, we talk about integrating acceleration and intervention and thinking about supporting acceleration in the physical classroom. Throughout the modules, we talk about prioritizing student supports using data, particularly thinking about should we reteach or refresh. So we talk about starting with what you might already have, such as screening and benchmarking. And then we want to also monitor progress in the classroom and think about where students left off last year, because these are going to help us think about how are students doing compared to where you would expect them to be at this point in the school year. Then we also think about what you might need to still collect. So diagnostic data that's specific to a particular math topic, particularly if it's a priority for the grade level. And once we know that, we think about how can we informally gather this information within the flow of the school day, and where can we do some pre-assessment to know if students are ready to move on to grade level material. Throughout, we talk about embedding pre-assessments. We want things to occur in the natural flow of the school day as much as possible. And we also talk about taking a team approach to diagnosing and assessing learning needs. Our hope is that the classroom teacher, the special education teacher, and the multilingual learning specialist, including also if a math interventionist is available, can all work together to combine current data sources and collect additional data. The goal is to think about what are the essential skills and knowledge that students need to work at a grade level, where might supports be needed, such as around content knowledge, practice standards, vocabulary, strategies, and models, and then thinking about some ways to determine what students know in those areas. We also throughout emphasize just-in-time supports. So the idea of remediation versus acceleration. With remediation, we're thinking that missing and forgotten content from the prior grade level is going to be taught at the start of the year for the first few weeks. But we know this approach may not work well for students. So if we move to an acceleration mindset, we're going to review critical prerequisite skills that students did not learn previously, and they're taught as they come up in the current grade level scope and sequence. So for example, if we think about a student who's struggling with adding fractions in 4th grade, if we took a remediation approach, the teacher goes back to those 3rd grade standards, shows how fractions are numbers, and continues to use that 3rd grade content as the focus for student work. In contrast with acceleration, the teacher is going to use models from 3rd grade to refresh those fraction concepts, just as students are beginning the unit in 4th grade. And they're also going to include some scaffolded problems throughout the 4th grade unit as it's taught. It's one thing to talk about all of these ideas and theories, but from practice, we found it most valuable when administrators and educators had an example that walked them through each of the components. So what you're seeing here is a sample slide of a case study that we threaded throughout all of our modules. In this case, we were modeling the process of planning acceleration strategies and supports for a third grade classroom, taking into consideration standards from second grade that needed to be woven into the third grade material.
With all the above information, we wanted to provide LEAs and schools and teams with recommendations and guidance on how best to systematically use the tools and information to make acceleration a school-wide approach. So here are the recommendations that were put out by the new teacher project, TNTP. We started here to think about how schools can systematically take the content we developed and share it amongst their LEAs, schools, and teams of teachers. So the first recommendation is the idea of exposing students to grade level content being the academic priority. Therefore, a simple task to ask themselves, will this help every student get back to grade level? Was a question they should ask themselves, and thinking critically about it to evaluate its priority. The pandemic has exacerbated existing inequities and opportunity gaps in schools and systems. Therefore, instruction should focus on creating equitable experiences and outcomes for all students, regardless of race, identity, disability, first language, and other background characteristics. So it was really important for schools to explore their data on an ongoing basis to assess inequities and plan to ensure that all students are successful. Students, families, and school staff have been doing the best they can in this unprecedented situation. So establishing a strong plan to provide training and support to teachers around acceleration. We'll be sharing examples of how they could create plans shortly. Families and staff likely still feel overwhelmed by the varying instructional models this year, virtual, in-person, hybrid, during the 2021 school year. So we want to make sure that the decisions the schools are making and the school leaders are clear and simply communicated to all stakeholders. And it's also helpful for them to understand how decisions were made and who were consulted in making those decisions. So we thought of the series being used in one of three ways. Each of these are options depending on the context of the LEA, the school, and the team of teachers that are working on this. Some might only have the capacity this year to access the content for building knowledge of what acceleration is and what are those strategies we could use. Depending on other initiatives and decisions, they might be able to designate a professional development day to engage in this work. And while the third option, the embedded ongoing professional learning, is proven to be the most effective, it also takes the most planning and coordination, which all sites might not be ready for this level of work. Acceleration is not a one and done thing. These are strategies that can be used year after year and really support educators in planning targeted, purposeful lessons. So while a site might not be currently ready to really use this embedded, we recommended that they not shy away from accessing the content to at least build the knowledge with purposeful actionable plans to engage more deeply in the work in the future. All the planned activities should be data-driven based on the local context, and the educators will need to access the data compiled meaningfully. They need easy access to resources such as the coherence map, priority standards, scope and sequences, and previous grade level curriculum materials. And it was really important for us to make all of this material accessible in the future so that they could continue this work moving forward. These are the three options that we provided to the LEAs on how they could leverage the content we developed. So considering the capacity and their varying needs, We wanted to provide flexibility around how to use the content with pathways to try now and options to consider for the future work. So the first one being just accessing the content. Teachers could do this asynchronously, could be all educators, all staff, and it can be done independently. You would need to allocate some resources in terms of time for the teachers to discuss and implement, and then really being proactive about the plan and consider the needs of the educators, especially those that often struggle to make progress or are those late implementers. How can administrators and leaders support them with implementation when this is done independently and asynchronously? The second option, using this during a professional development day, we really think of using this as a flipped classroom model with the expectation that everyone views the modules before coming together. And then when they do come together on that time, leadership would facilitate the discussion and the conversation and the planning. So you want to create a schedule for the groups to meet, have an agenda for the session, and then define the expected outcomes. And then also want to make sure you have some sort of knowledge check before planning to see where everyone's understanding is of what acceleration is. Again, proactively planning for those educators that struggle to make progress and need additional support in terms of implementing. And the last one being the embedded professional learning, which really becomes a cycle. Flipped classroom with the expectation that everyone views the applicable modules before meeting together, and then learning communities meet on a regular basis to continually plan, refine, and reflect on the acceleration strategies. This would be facilitated by those educators in those professional learning communities. But as leaders, we would want a schedule created for the groups to meet on the ongoing basis with designated time, an agenda specific for each session. What are those expected outcomes for those planning sessions? And even a template to document the progress and make communication transparent between the meetings. We would want to, again, make sure we have regular knowledge checks to ensure everyone is understanding the content, proactively plan and consider for those educators struggling and how we might support them. And then also plan to regularly check in on the professional learning communities. This could be done physically or even virtually through that documentation template, and ensuring that you are accessible and providing the supports that the teams of teachers could use.
As we began working in Rhode Island around acceleration strategies, we wanted to ensure we were collaborating with others across the state. Early in 2021, RIDE convened the LEAP task force to engage in a participatory, evidence-informed, and data-driven process to understand statewide learning during COVID-19 in partnership with educational experts, practitioners, families, students, and community members across the state of Rhode Island. The task force helped identify research-based strategies for accelerating learning opportunities in Rhode Island, aligned with additional funding opportunities. RIDE's theory of action is that if we identify, communicate, and support targeted high-priority standards and models for accelerated learning, then we can focus on a few high-value activities that LEAs could use to quickly accelerate student learning. It is also important for LEAs to collectively accelerate student learning so that it becomes a statewide system that is intentionally moving to respond to the clear and present needs of students, families, and educators. We also wanted to ensure that we coordinated efforts with this LEAP task force. At the school level, we want to promote universal screening as a priority to identify students needing assistance and align resources to meet their needs. We also recommend a focus on building and sustaining adult capacity to work in teams to support students holistically through MTSS. The Progress Center National Center for Learning Disabilities and the Rhode Island Math Intensive Intervention Project, which supports Rhode Island's SSIP, joined together to create professional learning opportunities in response to district requests for support. National data and information, along with a clear regrounding in what special education is and is not, anchored opportunities for general and special education district leadership to discuss topics of concern in breakout groups. Concerns about data validity and the need to message that students with IEPs are general education students first were two strong themes. The Rhode Island Department of Education collaborated with NCLD and the Progress Center to address some of the concerns heard in the field around increased referrals to special education. Special education administrators donated their typical cross-state meeting time for the virtual event and invited a general education leader to join them, such as assistant superintendents or MTSS coordinators. The math project shared examples and information on acceleration versus remediation as part of that session. And this information included how LEAs can use acceleration strategies across the instructional continuum of MTSS to support the larger than typical numbers of students identified at risk. Based on the information from NCLD, they shared 9 recommendations for learning recovery. These recommendations are shared as a link in our handout. Special education services are separate and apart from learning recovery programming. During their presentation, they emphasized that special education is not an intervention for any child who is behind, nor is it a quick fix. With the uptick in special education referral teams, they really need to make use of all the data sources, including implementation of instruction and fidelity of implementation, along with student performance and outcomes, to ensure that they are differentiating between disability and lack of good instruction or other challenges facing students due to the pandemic. NCLD shared information regarding what they were hearing from educators and parents over the last year. Educators shared that it is very difficult to measure student progress in virtual settings. They don't feel that formal measures of assessment are valid or reliable right now, especially if students are in hybrid models. Teachers prefer to informally assess where students are through time spent in small group or one-to-one, and would prefer not to use formal assessments that might penalize the student or school. Educators were not always thinking about acceleration or where to begin their instruction next year, despite instructional loss, because were just trying to make it through this school year. They recognize that students rising into a particular grade may not have the requisite content knowledge. They worry about being able to identify kids who need more support through MTSS versus determining what is just interrupted instruction, and are concerned that there is no baseline from which to work. However, districts have not yet given clear directives on how to manage that, and many educators do not have the capacity to begin planning for that already. Principals and administrators have major concerns about and anticipate a greater need as students return to school. They are grappling with how to differentiate between disability and lack of good instruction or other challenges facing students due to the pandemic. And they recognize this will be a major issue, particularly as there is no flexibility in timelines for evaluations as they try to reinstate strong instruction and provide interventions for students. Parents found that the pandemic exacerbated children's learning challenges and in some instances highlighted new areas of need. In particular, managing online assignments was difficult for students with executive functioning and reading challenges.
Continuing a focus on a coordinated approach, the Rhode Island Intensive Math Intervention Project joined one of their school-based teams at the Rhode Island Association of School Principals, known as RIAS, 4-day summer workshop on acceleration. Topics discussed during the sessions were what and why of acceleration, prioritizing content and task design, implications for pedagogy, time, focus, and intensity, implications for scheduling, staffing, instruction, and intervention, and guiding principles and conditions to effectively implement for the infrastructure. The workshop was a partnership between Connecticut Center for School Change and RIAS. They used the Connecticut Center for School Change's Accelerating Learning Framework to anchor the thoughts and discussion of the school teams. We provided a link to their resources in our handout. Based on the feedback from the RIAS workshop, we hope to tailor the administrator learning module to the discussions the school-based teams had and provide additional resources to support implementation of acceleration strategies and alignment between the various groups providing professional learning across the state.
We'd like to leave you with some key takeaways from our presentation. Remember to think about acceleration with just-in-time supports. Remembering that this is a better approach than remediation for addressing knowledge gaps in math. That doesn't mean remediation wouldn't be useful in some instances, but acceleration should be the go-to first. We also encourage you to take a team approach to using acceleration. We feel that when LEAs and schools commit to this team approach, combining that administrative buy-in with the teaching staff working collaboratively, this will help students address knowledge gaps. We also want you to remember that this takes time. It is not a one and done endeavor. Teams are going to need time to work through the process and regularly plan for the needs of their students. They need to first understand what is needed and then plan on the best approach to address it. And also make sure that they're monitoring students' progress throughout to continue to address student needs as they arrive.
Thank you for joining us on our presentation today, and please see our handout for our resources and references that we discussed during our presentation today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.